Do I want to tell them who I am?
Yes.
Oh.
Why don't we start out now? So why don't you let us know who you are and when you were born and what area of town?
Okay. See, I'm Connie Carr. I was born in Hyannis at the hospital, which is unusual at that time. And I lived just a little while in Marston's Mills and then moved to Forestdale. And I was born on July 1st, 1932. We thought it would be the 4th because that was my father's birthday, but I didn't quite make it. So,
And have you been in Forestdale ever since?
I was there until I was 18, and then I married somebody from Air Force Base because I was the closest girl, and went away for 20 years, and I've been back since 1970.
Wow. And was your father or parents in Forestdale prior to that? Is there a history of the family going back in that community?
Yes. The history of the Crocker family, which I was a Crocker, goes back to right after the Pilgrims, 1600 and something. But the Crockers in Forestdale, I'm not sure, probably late 1800s. I'm not positive of that. But I'm 12th generation or 11th generation Crocker. But I go back to John Howland on the Mayflower, so I think that makes it 12. Wow. I'm not sure.
And your father was from Forestdale as well?
Forestdale, yeah. He was born and raised in Forestdale. Oh. And he was a character. He was a local character.
Tell us about him.
Well, he owned the first bulldozer on Cape Cod, and he dug a lot of cellar holes, and he moved buildings. Let's see. He had a cranberry bog, and there's a little girl he used to take me with him to when they were picking cranberries, and that was great. You know, they did it all different in those days. They had the women checking the cranberries and pulling out the bad ones, and it's over in South Sandwich, and he owned it with somebody else, and that somebody else lived across the street, and he used to take me over there, and they had no children. And so when I would come down to the bog, she would take me up to her house for a little while to play with me. And she'd mark it on her door jamb, the side of the door, how tall I was each year. Well, the people that bought the house after they passed away came into the post office one day and told me they still have my measurements.
So your father was in business right there in Forestdale. What time period was that he was in business, roughly?
32, probably about 28 to when he passed away at 72. I don't know what that year was. It was 11, probably 1990.
And you said he moved to build. Tell me about moving the buildings. How did that work?
But he was a friend with Bob Hayden, who was the big building mover around here. His son is doing it now. And Daddy had a flatbed truck, and they'd raise them up with jacks, the buildings, and then raise it up high enough so that they could back the truck, the trailer underneath the building, and then they'd cart it to wherever it was going.
Move it to another part of
another
part of town.
Yeah. And I have a picture I'll bring in to let you have it.
Okay. Now, your father must have gone to school. Tell us about his schooling experience here.
Well, I think he went to school at the Little Red Schoolhouse in Forestdale. I can't swear to that, but it would be logical. He was raised there. That's where he grew up. So he went to the Little Red Schoolhouse. Then he went to the academy down in East Sandwich, up to the right of the town hall. And then when his class was the first class to graduate from the H.T. Wing School. And there was no electricity in the auditorium that night. I don't know if in the whole school, but in the auditorium. And they put cars outside with the lights shining into the auditorium, and had the graduation in there.
Wow. Wow. How many people graduated with him in that year? Do you remember that?
How many people what?
How many people were in the graduating class back when
my class?
Your father's class.
Oh, my father's. Oh, I have a picture of that too, but I'm maybe 30 or so.
Okay.
It's bigger than my class.
Okay.
I do have a picture. Maybe you'd like a
Sure.
copy of it.
That'd be great. So your dad was not involved in World War II, but you were a young person around that time. Tell me about your recollections of the things that you remember from World War II as a kid and what your parents may have told you.
Okay. Well, we had these little buildings that they had people volunteered, and they watched for airplanes coming in. And then you'd telephone every plane that came in. Of course, you're close to Otis, so you're going to have quite a few. But they had little buildings all over the Cape.
Even in Forestdale?
Even in Forestdale, yeah. One up almost to the end of the village on the Burke's property. And they'd let me go and visit them sometimes, so I got to do it too. And let's see, there was the ship torpedoed off of the canal out in the bay, and everybody went down and got rugs, Oriental rugs. And my father got one, and Charlie Whitmore, who was with him, got one. He took his bulldozer down, and they put ropes around it, the rugs, and pulled them in. And some people got a lot of rugs, and they came around and they made all those people give them back. But because Daddy and Charlie just got one each, they let them keep them. And those rugs are still in existence. One's in Florida, my son has it, and one's stored here in the area somewhere that Charlie had. His daughter just sold the house it was in, and it's still around.
Wow.
In good shape.
Excellent.
I hate to think what that was. I think she said it's worth about $6,000 now. She had it appraised, yeah. So.
And you were telling me about the gardens that you kept as a little kid. Tell me about that experience.
Okay,
where
well,
it was and what it was.
When I was young, I belonged to a 4-H club, and we had these little victory gardens. And everybody grew a little bit. We had rationing, of course, for meat. And actually, this is kind of a cute story. That we had a lamb that we were raising for meat. So my father had it butchered, and as we're having our first lamb meal, he goes, bah, and nobody would eat it. We had to give it all away. But we had boarders that were working on Camp Edwards, and or Otis, but probably Camp Edwards. And they had ration stamps, and my mother cooked all the meals, so we got to have good food, always had good food. And so it had its rewards, having a big house and lots of bedrooms.
Well, we haven't talked much about your house. Describe your family's house back then.
Okay, it was a
how big it was, and tell us about why you had boarders and how much room you had to keep them.
Well, we had 3 bedrooms upstairs and one downstairs. And before the boarders, we had my great-grandmother who lived there, and then Mrs. Fisher, who had lived across the street. And I hear that the Fish family got tired of being called Fish, so they changed it to Fisher, but I didn't know that till recently. I don't know if it's a true story, but I heard that. Anyway, so we always had somebody extra in the house, always. We had, and I still have in my house too, usually. But it was, let me see, we had wives from Otis that would come out and stay with us. And my big trip was to Laconia, New Hampshire, where my mother drove one of the ladies up there because she needed to get home for some reason. But we had strangers in the house all the time.
And would you rent a bedroom room out?
Yes.
And for a certain period of time? How did that work?
It all depended on them. It was how long they needed it.
Okay.
And if it was men, workers, they would share, maybe 2 or 3 in one bedroom. And we also, when Veg Acre Farm started, we had the fellows that worked there. We had Big Joe and Little Joe, Joe Terry and Joe Oliveira and all that worked for Mr. Richards. So, and it's funny, I see them now. Well, both of the Joes have passed away, but I see people now and I think, oh, I know them, but I don't remember where.
I didn't hear that. The Oliveri Farm, is that what you're saying?
No, it was Vegacre Farm.
Tell us about that.
Vegacre was purchased by Mr. William Richards. We have the Richards Road that goes into the Forestdale School. And he, I think there's 100 acres up there, I'm not sure. It used to be a sheep farm when Mr. Lombard owned it. And well, I guess a lot of this whole area was sheep farm. And I don't know, did anybody tell you about the fact that it used to be Greenville, Forestdale?
Why don't you tell us that story?
Okay,
'Cause a
well,
lot
it
of
used to be
people may not know
Greenville.
that story.
And there was another Greenville in Massachusetts, so when the post office got active and had zip codes and all that, we had to change the name, so they changed it to Forestdale. And Greenville was developed to supply the trees, the woods for burning down the Sandwich. That's what Forestdale was all about, to supply wood, to keep the people in Sandwich warm. See, they always think Forestdale's supposed to take care of Sandwich. Let's see, what else was I supposed to tell you then?
Well, you can tell me about your time when you were in school and how you got to school.
Oh.
About your own school experience. So I'll just open-end that. Tell me about
Okay.
how you got to school and where was the school?
Okay, we went to Henry T. Wing School all 12 years. And we got to school on a bus, and Sandwich had 2 buses at the time, one for East Sandwich and one for Forestdale, and South Sandwich together. So we got to know everybody in South Sandwich and Forestdale. It was wonderful. And there would be 12 years of ages, so, you kind of watched out for the little ones, or the big ones took care of you, or whatever. It was very, very nice to be a part of this little community.
And how little was it? How many people were we talking?
In Forestdale, there were about 100. Now there's probably 1,500. I'm not sure, but it's huge now. I mean, there's houses out in the woods everywhere, beautiful ones, some gorgeous houses. And of course, our lakes draw people. We have Pimlico Pond and Peters Pond and Snake Pond. Sounds like we're interviewing for Forestdale, doesn't it?
So there were times you told me that you were active in a lot of things in school. So tell me about some of your activities in school, whether it's sports or bands. So I'll leave it, just tell me about
Okay.
those things.
Well, in the 7th grade, they needed a bass player. Mr. Quizzy was our leader, and he had a sousaphone, and he wanted somebody to play it. Well, I was always the kind that volunteered to do whatever, nobody else wanted to do. So I did it. I was also the tallest probably. Maybe Jackie was taller, but I'm not sure, Jackie McCardle. But anyway, so I said I'd try it. So I played all through 6 years in school, 7th grade through 12th.
And what instrument were you playing?
Sousaphone. And I played in the Cape Cod Band with Barbara Gates was in it, and Ruth Van Buskert, and I don't know Ruth's last name now, but she was a classmate. And they played the, can't think of it. No,
That's okay.
It doesn't matter. Anyway, so Mr. Quizzy would come and pick us up from our houses and drive us, because we were too young to drive, and take us all over the Cape for concerts, which was a great thing, and you met some wonderful people. We met like Con Copey from Sagamore, he was in the band, and it was a great experience.
And are you still in the band these days?
Yes, we have a Sandwich band. It's 30 years old, and I've been playing with it since it started. And I not play the sousaphone anymore. I play a tuba, which is played the same way. It's just held differently. A sousaphone is for a marching band. Another little piece of history here. We were playing for the 4th of July parade in Sandwich, probably in 1949 or 48, I'm not sure. But Mr. Quizzy, the leader, was standing beside me, and we were marching down Main Street. And he dropped dead right there beside me. I don't know how many people remember that, but it was pretty.
You remember that?
I remember it very well, yeah. And he was so nice, and his daughter Lois, played in the band, not in our high school band, but it was kind of a shock.
Wow.
And Lenny, has been leading the band. He started our town band. Can't remember his name at the moment. It's getting old bad.
That's okay. That's okay. And tell me, where is the band playing these days for the people who aren't aware of it? Tell us about where you play.
Oh,
and
behind
how many people are in the band?
There's about 35 people in the band, and they're from all over this area. And I'm the only native Sandwich person in it. Isn't that amazing?
Yes.
And it's behind the Wing School in the gazebo, which Lenny had. I want to think of his name, but he had built by one of the local lumber companies, Mid-Cape maybe, or I'm not sure.
And
The local lumber companies are very supportive of things. The one over in Hyannis, he lives in Sandwich. He donates money and donates his truck when we do bands concerts in Osterville.
how often do you have the band concerts, and is it during the summer? Tell
During
the
the summer.
listeners about that.
From about the end of June to the end of August. And it's every Thursday night at 7:30 till 9. And if you have children, come ahead. They love it. They love it. They march around the bandstand, and they give out the little flags, and they do the hokey pokey, and they love it.
And
They really
that's a
do.
Sandwich tradition, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, some of them are all grown up and have children of their own.
Now, let's get you back to school for a minute, because you were in other activities other than the band. I think you told me about some of your
Yeah.
athletic events. And
Well, we had a great girls basketball team. I don't know how we got so good, but we liked our coach for one thing, Mr. Zion, and we played against every town on the Cape, big or little, and my aunt played for Hyannis, for Barnstable. Well, we beat Barnstable, this little Sandwich town. She wouldn't talk to me for quite a while. And they cried. I mean, but we played up at Otis for the championship for Cape Cod at their gym, and we won. So that was pretty exciting for Sandwich.
Wow.
And Mr. Zion was a big part of Sandwich during that period, and he has a scholarship that he gave money for scholarship for graduates and so forth. So a lot of people in my age group will remember Mr. Zion, Ed Zion.
Where did you practice for the games?
For the games in the gym, which is now I don't know what it is now. I think it might be the cafeteria now.
Okay.
Things have changed a lot down there.
Yeah. And you were telling me about the bus took the kids home, and if you were in an activity that extended beyond the school day, how did that work? How did you get
Well,
to Forestdale?
I was really fortunate in that there was a lady named Mrs. Smith, and she worked at the Sandwich Cooperative Bank, where Jack Gilson was the president. And I would go there after whatever activity I had was through and sit and wait, and she would take me home almost every single night of the week. I mean, school night. And
Because there wasn't a bus?
there was no bus, no late buses. There was only 2 buses, and they went morning and afternoon, and that was it. And I have a little story. You can see if you like this or not, but Mrs. Smith's daughter was Priscilla, and she was friends with Nora Bianchi, who a lot of people in Sandwich had for teachers. And Nora was in the nursing home, and I used to go to see Nora because I figured I was paying back Mrs. Smith for all those rides, because Nora took care of Mrs. Smith's daughter when she couldn't get around. So we had this little pay-it-forward situation there. And Nora was a wonderful lady, and people that had her for teachers will speak of her highly. She was a wonderful lady.
Wow. Now, you were a teenager in Forestdale. What did you do for excitement back in that period of time in the 1940s or so, for fun and excitement as a teenager?
Well, there wasn't much excitement in Forestdale. I have to say that. I was a bookworm. And in the 3rd grade, my third grade teacher, Miss Consolini, which most everybody that was older had for a third grade teacher, where we learned about Cape Cod exclusively, she would let me go down to the library and get books. At third grade, can you imagine that? Go from Henry T. Wing down to the library by yourself. Once in a while, there'd be somebody else who would go with me, but I had to go get my entertainment down at the library. So that was, I can't imagine a teacher letting a third grader go down now.
No.
But we were very mature. We had to be. I lived out there in the country, and you had to learn to be independent.
And part of your independence, you were telling me, was getting your first automobile. Tell us about how you acquired your first automobile and what it was. And
Well, my grandmother Macamber, who was always a wonderful grandmother, had an old 37 Plymouth, and she was getting rid of it because she was going to get some other Plymouth, a newer one. So I wanted to buy it. I was 16, and I had savings bonds that were worth $300. And so I gave her the $300, and I got the car. Well, when my grandmother passed away, many years later, I got my bonds back, so the car was free. And I had told you a little story about how my classmates would borrow the car. Marilyn Myers, who was Marilyn Ambro, and a couple of others. Every once in a while would buy the car. But first of all, I have to drive it down to them. And then they would run out of gas because they had a gas leak in the car, the gas tank. And they called my father to come bring them gas because he had a gas tank in his yard.
where did you go with your car back in Sandwich in 1940?
Well, we'd go up to the bowling alley in Buzzards Bay. And in the old days, we used to take the train up from Sandwich to go to bowling up at Buzzards Bay. And we had another way to go, too.
Tell us about where the train was.
The train stopped at this train station in Sandwich to cross the track, where the tracks are.
Okay.
And a lot of us would go, well, a lot, there weren't a lot, but some of us would go up on Saturdays. And I would stay downtown. I had girlfriends that I would stay downtown with quite often. That their mothers were really nice to me, and they knew I was lonely up there in Forest Hill, and they let me stay down there with them.
Mm.
And so we'd go up there. And sometimes there was a man named Mr. Kershaw who had a rumble seat car, and he would take some of us up on a Saturday in the rumble seat, in the front seat and the rumble seat, but we all fought about the rumble seat. We wanted it, to go up there to bowl, or go to the movies, too. They had the movies. It's not there anymore, but they had a movie up there.
And did you ever take it up to Boston? Did you go to the train to Boston very much?
When I went away to school, I didn't last very long because I got married and had 3 children when everybody else graduated from college. But I went to nurses training at Children's Medical Center, and I drove my old Plymouth up there. But I hadn't been to Boston very much, and it was so exciting. I spent a lot of time going down to Flene's basement. I loved it. So I don't know if I would have passed or not, but I decided to get married and had, as I say, 3 children by whenever Barbara Gill and all the other ones graduated. I had 3 children.
Wow.
So.
And what was Flynn's basement?
Feline's.
Oh, Feline's.
Feline's, you know Feline's probably.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Excellent. Let's go back to Forestdale again a little bit and tell me about the post office experience that you had in Forestdale. Was there a post office? Where was it?
Okay.
How did you get involved with that?
Right on Burke's Corner, which they call it now. It didn't used to be called that, but it's Burke's Corner now. Right past it, there was a little gas station and a little grocery store, and in the corner of the grocery store was the post office. Mrs. Pocknick from Mashpee was our route lady. And when I was young, I don't know, maybe 11, 12, 13, couldn't have been much older than that. I used to work in there and help Mr. the DeLongs owned it. They're the grandparents of the Burke family, of one of the Burkes, I think Bertha. And anyway, so I keep telling myself. I should get a hold of the post office and have them get me credit for those the times that I worked at the post office way back then.
Well, did your mother, tell me about your mother.
But
Was she
you see, my
working?
mother was the postmaster ahead of me. Mrs. Scavone was ahead of her, and it was at where the little bait shop is now in Forestdale. And when Mrs. Scavone retired, just before she retired, she hired me as a clerk. And then my mother took over as postmaster. And so when she decided to retire, my mother couldn't even give me a recommendation, you know, because she was my mother. And so I had to meet a board from Virginia. Can you imagine? But they liked me, so I got it.
And how long were you in that postmaster business?
I think from 78 to 94, 93. I can remember when I started the 78, but the finish up part I can't remember. But I worked for the post office from 71.
Okay. And what happened?
Oh, so that had to be 93 then, because I worked 22 years. That makes it.
Okay. And just to bring the audience up to date, what happened to that post office and where is the post office now?
Oh, well, that post office was the greatest thing that anybody could have done for me, because I worked with Linda O'Connell, Linda Parent she is now, and we worked so well together. And she's retiring within a few days, tomorrow. In fact, she's going to retire. And we had fun. Our customers loved to come in there because we always were laughing and giggling and carrying on. And we had people come in and write letters to us back about how they enjoyed us, and they wrote to our bosses even. And but she is a super, super person, and everybody that knows Linda loves her. So
what happened to the post office?
well, it became when I retired. Soon after, I don't know how long it was, maybe 2000. So I guess that's quite a while. It became a restaurant. Like in the morning, they had breakfast and so forth, and lunch. I don't think they had dinners though. I was away then. I married somebody in the Air Force and went away for 20 years, so I wasn't here when. No, I was here then. That was after I retired. Well, anyway, it was a food place for a while, and then the bait shop came in, and it's still going strong. I think he's doing okay there. And they moved the the old one. I mean, the post office down into the mall near the what is that called? Taverna, behind there, and it's going strong. It's a very active post office. It's sort of the center of the town because South Sandwich uses it, Forestdale uses it. People from East Sandwich even come over there and use it, you know, because that makes sense. Mm-hmm. And it's very good. And Bob is good postmaster, good to work for. Everybody likes him too.
Great.
Yeah.
At one time you were telling me about your recollections of your father during the Depression and how that impacted your father and yourself later on. So tell us a little bit about your recollections and what your father had told you about that time.
Well, let's see. My father worked from the time he was very young. He supported his mother from the time he was young. And during the Depression, there was no money. But they were smart enough to have people come in and live at the house, so we had some little bit of extra money. Plus, he did work that you need, whether it's Depression or not, you need to have cellar holes dug. And he worked 50 years at the dump. Besides, he was the one that took care of the dump. Had this bulldozer down there. I forgot all about